Hey folks, it's me. It's your old pal Stu. Let's talk about the ethos of the age. The ethos that binds together various artistic movements and periods. This is something that I think is really essential for understanding how art, whether we're talking about visual art or we're talking about music or we're talking about literature, how styles change over time and how we put these brackets around periods of art and periods of literature. Why we view things written between a certain span of years as being part of this period and things that define this period stylistically. I think the ethos of it is what drives a lot of the stylistic changes and a lot of the things that we see in any given period and indeed in different artistic movements, especially as we get closer to the modern age. You start to see there's multiple things happening at the same time with different ethos. The ethos being the motivation, the beliefs that give rise to the approach to art, the reason that artists are doing that. This has a lot of overlap with words like zeitgeist, like the spirit of the age, the feelings of the age. But this is more like what beliefs, I'm using this in the way to think, what beliefs about people, about art, about God, what beliefs are causing the art to be made in the way it is. I think once you understand this, it's really easy to think about how art in the medieval period, for example, was expressed and how you could see it, that same ethos being applied to different forms of art in a way that's consistent. And there's no like one set way to look at a particular period, but you will find that there's more than just style that binds them. There are ideas that give rise to that style. So I wrote down a couple of little slogans for some of the major art periods. So for the medieval, for the glory of God and his church. What you see with the medieval period is most of the art being made is in service to the church. So it'll be statuary on a church. It'll be screens and icons for a church. You will have music that's written down in pneumatic notation to be performed at church. So it's not that there's no art outside of the church, so that there's no secular art, but most of the art that we have that survives is religious in nature, the church being the big employer of those artists, and many of the artists were indeed clergy members. You have a lot of art that survives from the medieval period in, for example, illuminated manuscripts, say of Bibles or things like that, things that monks drew down when they were copying various texts. So a lot of the art that you see from the medieval period is really directed towards God. And there's things that go along with that. The fact that most of the music from the medieval period, at least until we get to the late medieval period with like Guillaume de Fay, Guillaume de Machant, isn't signed. It's just written anonymously because the authorship wasn't as important as the fact that you were doing this for some other purpose. So authorship is often missing from a lot of medieval art. When you move into the Renaissance ethos is really about natural beauty, the beauty of creation, the beauty of man's form, and we should accurately represent that. So you see perspective start to come into visual art. You see music start to become highly complex. Polyphony is the dominant style of music at the time. The art of the time is considered some of the most beautiful ever drawn because of that emphasis on the natural. What does man's figure actually look like? What does he naturally appear to be? And what does his environment more naturally appear to be as well? It's not an emphasis on realism, but the beauty of nature. We're trying to emphasize the beauty of nature and the beauty of man. There was an ethos that underlied that about coming out of a dark age, coming out of what we call now the Middle Ages. But this belief was existed even in the late medieval, that there was going to be a reawakening, that mankind was going to rise back up from, for example, the oppression of the Black Death and things like that. This isn't, so it's sort of humanist, but it's not humanist in the way that people think of secular humanism today. It's a different thought process about that. And again, most of the art, or a large portion of the art, is for the church. The church is the main shall we say, patron of the arts during the Renaissance period. Most of the music that we have that survives is religious. We start to have secular music that survives, especially with lute tablature, for example, or in England, there's quite a bit of secular music that was written down that survives. So secular music, secular art, right, creating art for rich patrons. This starts to be something that exists in the Renaissance period. The gain of wealth is part of that. So the Renaissance, however, transitions into the Baroque. And so my little motto for the Baroque is beauty through natural complexity and artistic skill. So in this case, it's about the complexity of reality. It's not just about showing it naturalistically, but we would compose scenes in paintings, for example, that have many figures and have many expressions, and there's lots of, you might have a painting of Christ being crucified, and you would see a whole host of characters around it, and every detail would be directed towards the purpose of that painting. It'd be hyper complex, and the skill of the artist is on full display. It's about how great that artist can make that painting, and even if that is directed towards God in the case of a religious work, or directed towards a rich patron to show him in a heroic setting. That was the way that Baroque art was done. And we see the same thing with music, the dominant form of music being counterpoint. You have things like the fugue, Johann Sebastian Bach in the High Baroque being probably the best example of this. You also have art that is like operas, things that are designed to entertain and delight people outside of church. So you have a secularization of art. Art starts to be about a lot more than just what you're doing in church. It becomes about the skill of the artist and how much you can impress the audience. Once we get past the Baroque, we start to get to the classical, also called the Enlightenment. We have a transitionary period there called the Galant and the Rococo, which we don't need to get into, but it's very influential on what followed, which is mainly about the beauty of a central figure. Like in the paintings, you'll notice they start to be simpler and more about balance and harmony and showing the best qualities and the best features of the subject. You'll notice that 18th century art, the subjects get less realistic and they start to be more about how to make that subject as beautiful as possible rather than as real as possible, which was something that was more from earlier periods. With the music, you start to have homophony be the dominant form of music, which is one single melody line with some accompaniment, right? So chords, basically chords and melody, and that becomes the dominant way that you're going to write music all the way through the 20th century. Even to today, pop music is primarily homophonic. Okay, so it becomes about the beauty of that central melody and how you support and balance that melody to create a harmonious thing. The Romantic, my slogan is the heart of the artist. It's all about your emotions and how you're communicating them to the other person. And if you have to break the rules to communicate those emotions, you're going to do it. Beethoven was a big rule breaker, right? Schubert was bending and pushing the rules, So you have great artists putting their hearts on display, making things that are about passion. You have the exploration of techniques such as rubato, speeding up and slowing down the music to increase the emotional effect of the music. And in art, you have painters like Caspar David Friedrich painting these wonderful emotional scenes of nature. In literature, you have things like Goethe with the Sorrows of Young Werther being very influential on all the other arts. This emotionalism, looking out at the scene of nature and the natural beauty and feeling the emotion about it. So it's about man's relationship to nature. It's about man's relationship to creation, how he feels about things, not just about some objective beauty, but about the feeling. That's the Romantic period. We see it in our literature, whether it is a romance like Ivanhoe or it's something that's more personal like Goethe. The Post-Romantic, here's my slogan: man and myth, passion and warfare. The Post-Romantic is probably my favorite period in art and music as I think about it. And that's because we have the most epic operas. We have the most epic, stirring, long, bombastic music ever written in a lot of cases. In terms of orchestral music, it doesn't get any better than Wagner, right? Or opera, it doesn't get any better than Wagner or Strauss or Gustav Holst with the Planet Suite, which is so influential, such an influential piece of music, or Rimsky-Korsakov, right? These post-romantic composers just did such wonderful, stirring, epic music that was about a theme and really was about telling a story. And the operas were big and larger than life. You had The Ring of the Nibelungs, which was 3 nights of opera. Things were bigger and badder than ever before. They took everything that had been done since the Baroque to its maximal conclusion in the post-romantic. The emphasis tends to be on sweeping romance, on mythology, on fantastical ideas, big ideas. That's what the post-romantic is very much about. Once we get there, we have a whole bunch of different movements. So here's the Impressionist one, which really is kind of overlaps and is part of the modern, the emerging of the modern, which is the precious fleeting moment and the feeling of a time and place. Impressionist paintings, they get this, rather than details, it's about the feeling, it's about the impression you get of the place. Impressionist music, same idea. We have a turning away from tonality. We're trying to evoke a mood, a feeling for a little bit with you, not trying to create tension and resolution or a feeling of like epic change. We're just trying to paint a picture with our tones and then move on. I'm very influenced by Impressionist music, not as much by Impressionist painting. I like post-romantic painting. I like especially like pre-Raphaelite stuff, which is almost a reaction to the reaction, right? Anyway, modern comes around at the same time. Here's the ethos of the modern. Man can make new beauty with the power of his mind and will. Arnold Schoenberg creates 12-tone music, which just turns the tonal system we'd used since the dawn of time on its head. It throws it out the window and democratizes the notes. All 12 notes on the keyboard, all the white and black keys, they're all similar now. They occur at the same frequency. The dissonance is tightly controlled. No sense of tension and release that we get from tonal music. It's in complete rebellion to what came before it, which was derived out of nature. And you can watch my videos on music theory if you want to, but it used to be that all of music theory was derived out of the mathematical relationships between music over time and then vertically between pitches. This frequency being double that one and so forth. I have a whole series on that you can watch if you want to take the time. 12-tone music just does away with that. There's a reason people don't like 12-tone music, and that's because it's in rebellion against nature. And we have this with modern art as well. Modern art, we'll talk about the postmodern in a second. People often confuse these two. Modern art was about creating new aesthetics. Pablo Picasso is probably the best modern artist as far as an example. Arnold Schoenberg and Igor Stravinsky being the best modern composers. The best modern artist, I think, is Pablo Picasso. He had the blue period, painting these things that are very influenced by, Impressionism and, emotionalism and things like that, and is more not about the technical qualities of the piece, but being unique and interesting, into Cubism and all these other things that he would experiment with over the course of his life. But there's a problem, though. I think most people, when they're trying to compare Pablo Picasso to, for instance, and in the article I wrote, I think I used Peter Paul Rubens, right, a Baroque painter. If you're trying to compare the two, you cannot be intellectually honest and say that Pablo Picasso's paintings are better than Peter Paul Rubens or Jacob Jordaens or any of those, like the Dutch masters. You can't be honest with that, right? You can say Pablo Picasso's paintings had a quality to them that's worth looking at, that's interesting, but you can't really say that he's better or he's even in the same league as Peter Paul Rubens. And that's because the ethos of the modern man is in rebellion against what Rubens was doing. Rubens was trying to present the beauty of the forms that God made, not including his, especially Jacob Jordaens would paint these paintings of grotesque, ugly people, which is weird, right? But there was a genre for that. But it was really about, let me show what this person is, because that ugliness can have an effect too. Anyway, not to go too deep down that rabbit hole, but painting something realistically and showing what's naturally there. That's what drove most art prior to the modern period. I guess once you have photography, is there a point in making it hyper realistic? I think there is, but that's a discussion for another day. Anyway, the point is they're different because they're operating under different ethoses. It's a mistake to compare them to and to try to put them in the same league or category because the ethos that drives them is so alien. Pablo Picasso's is in rebellion against all that came before. Then moves on to postmodernism, which the motto is anything can be art. All reactions to art are valid. Farting into a microphone can be art. A broken toilet can be art. Putting a microphone and eating crackers, which John Cage did, that could be art. That could be music. Opening up the keyboard and just letting people hear the air conditioner, that could be music. That was John Cage's whole thing. There's a meta question to the art, which is what is art? Banana to the wall could be art. That's postmodernism. Okay, so a splash on the wall, throwing paint, that could be art. And that can whatever feelings that causes people to feel, those are valid. Okay. And if I look at some painting from the past and I feel revulsion, that's a valid feeling. It's nothing wrong with me, right? That sort of thing. So that's the ethos of postmodernism. Now, I'm going to talk about the corporatism, and I've wrote this whole series on corporate art, and it's very important to think about what's going on during the 20th century that's not modern and postmodern, because the modern and the postmodern are primarily academic. They're part of the academic elite, and the common man is not interacting with them nearly as much as corporate art. So popular art or corporate art is art that's designed to appeal to human beings in a market segment and for them to buy that art. So they're going to buy it in some capacity. They're going to buy a novel from a newsstand or from a store, and they're going to read it because they enjoy it. And it's going to be in a genre like horror or science fiction or fantasy. So all of the genres that emerge from the 20th century of literature, of art, of music, all of these things are the result of the ethos of the corporate movement, which is, what does the market want? What does the market want to see? What do they want to read? That's the ethos of the corporate period in the arts, which is most of the 20th century, and most of the art that I've talked about on this channel and that chances are you discuss with other people is going to fit into that category. It's mass market distribution. It's a movie that's made for everybody to watch at the movie theater. It's a piece of music that's on the radio. It is a piece of visual art that's maybe selling sunglasses. It's commercial art. Okay, it's a comic book, right? It's telling a story. It's printed 100,000 copies for 100,000 people to read. It's mass market. That's corporate art. What does the market want to see? And lastly, the eclectic, which is what I think we're entering into in the 21st century, which is I have my own scene. That's the motto there. I have my own scene. We're all kind of atomized. We're all on our own. And that's what I think we're going to see deepening going forward, is that we'll have this art scene and that art scene, and we'll kind of go across each other. There's someone who's really into metal and he's in that scene, but he's really into science fiction. So he's in two different scenes at once that he's focusing on, and it's about him. The artists that are in those scenes are making art for the people that are in those scenes that are also making art. So we're all making art for each other in these little groups, whether it's like indie science fiction authors, or it is, esoteric heavy metal, or it is flamenco or something, right? It's going to be all of these little scenes, and I think that'll get deeper. We're going to have a loss of what I would call popular culture, right? Popular culture will give way to the eclectic, to lots of little subcultures. So anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to go deep on that stuff and give it to you, right? If you are ignoring like the difference between the corporate and the modern and the postmodern, you're going to really easily fall into a trap of saying John Cage and Elvis Presley are postmodern. They're not. Elvis Presley is operating in the corporate mode via the corporate ethos. John Cage is operating in the academic area via the postmodern ethos, asking questions about what art is. Elvis never questioned that. He just wanted to make music. He wanted to write hit records, and everybody wanted him to write hit records at the record company. So don't make that mistake. These are separate streams. Jazz and blues and rock, that's all in the corporate stream. And then the academic stream is going to be like Stravinsky and Milton Babbitt and John Cage and all the people that follow him. Even Philip Glass, who I really like, or Steve Reich, who I really, really love their music. The minimalist style is in some ways a reaction to postmodernism while being in the postmodern stream. Interesting thing to think about. Leave me your thoughts down below. King Leper is out for pre-order. It'll be out in July. So if you missed the Kickstarter, you can still pre-order the ebook, and we'll have new physical editions. The blue editions, hardback and paperback, will be available. Don't forget to join my mailing list at dvspress.com/list, and I will see you all next time. Leave me your thoughts. Have a great day. And do check out my series on music theory. If you have never understood what music theory is, I break it down from the smallest and take it up to, I think, homophony. Maybe I'll continue that. If you want me to continue the music theory series or kind of remaster it, then maybe I'll do that one of these days. But leave me your thoughts, and I will see you all next time.